Traders, how are you? Marcello, founder of the Day Trading Academy, co-founder of Speed Up Trader, where you guys can come and trade a funded account instead of your own account in the markets. Today I wanted to share a video that I did in a presentation in a seminar that we had a few weeks ago. This was the Saturday before the gigantic crash in the markets. And I think it's really interesting. I wanted to first advise you, obviously, educational purposes only. I'm not advising you guys where to buy or sell, right? Because we only do it for education. Also, be careful because you want to make sure you do your research for everything that you guys want to invest in. So I'm kind of going through the explanation of the silver miners, of the way that I'm trading right now. And one of the things that I like about the fact is that I think in this industry, most people just share all the winners and all the money they supposedly make. And this is actually a situation where I have two very big losers. If I remember correctly, it's about $40,000 or $50,000 in losses right now. And I wanted to share that with you to show you kind of how I'm seeing things. I don't anticipate that they're going to continue to be losing positions over time, but I might have to wait a few months. One was actually my fault. The other one wasn't. Do a reverse stock split. But I just wanted to kind of give you a quick intro into the video because I think you'll find it very, very interesting. So let me know if you guys have any questions and enjoy the video. So this is the chart of silver. It's a daily chart on this is TradingView. It's a web-based platform that doesn't have ticks yet. I'm working with the head engineer there to be able to add ticks to be able to go ahead and be able to use it. So you guys don't have to install Ninja. You guys can do it from a web application or Google Chrome, for example. So down here is about, I think it's 15. I can't really read that. I'll tell you guys in a second. But the mining price of silver is about $14, $15. What's going on right now is that the price has gone down so low that a lot of mines have gone out of business, and then that adds extra buying pressure to silver, the price of silver. Because the longer, if you guys didn't know, gold and silver is being manipulated as well, and it's being pushed to the downside. The longer it stays down, the more buying pressure there will be in the future, because the mines close down. It takes hundreds of millions of dollars to open up a mine again, and so it's not as easy to just pop them on and off, right? So there's some positions that I have that are super long term. We're talking about years, and there's some that are short term. And the line on the bottom is about 14. This is the daily chart. Over here is if I move the mouse, you guys can see it, right? Up here at the top is what happened during the crisis in 2008, 2009, right? That was the results of that. And you guys can see for the most part, it's been sitting at $14, $15. Every time that this gets under $14, $15, you guys can see how it just snaps back immediately. You guys see it? This right here is obviously some manipulation, but you guys can see every single time it gets there, it just snaps right back, snaps right back. Even this right here, it didn't do it as quickly, but it happened as well. So I don't trade with stops with this kind of what I'm doing now, due to the fact that I took about $120,000 loss on a position that I took. And the reason why I do the miners is because I was trading on the silver futures doing long term, and I had to keep closing and opening the positions with the futures contract because it moves over every month, okay? And other things too, like gold and silver, the November month, for example, basically is skipped, and it skips over to December. So when I first started doing this, it was I was in October, then I switched to November. Nobody really wasn't trading it. It was just a big mess. So that's why I do that. The circle here, the red circle, is something from a while ago that I was anticipating it to get back here. You guys can see all the drawings and everything that I had. And then we had the huge run up in silver, which went all the way up to about 1977 or so. Silver futures, every dollar in profit is a $5,000 profit per contract. So on the S&P 500, it goes up a point. We win $50. Silver is $5,000 per point. So it's the highest leveraged future, even though it's 100 cents, 100 ticks per point, not like the ES, which is 4 ticks per point. So the essential stop, quote unquote, that I use is a fundamental stop, because if silver goes down, it is not humanly possible for it to stay down there for too long, because of what I just told you guys about the mines and the manipulation and everything. In 2000 and, if I'm not mistaken, 16, the U.S. Mint in the United States ran out of silver. There's literally not enough silver for the world anymore. Like, they just ran out of it. The government, they didn't have any more. So that's more buying pressure. And eventually what I think will happen, it might be, I don't think it'll be a year from now, but we're talking a little bit more longer term. We're going to get one of these parabolic moves again where silver just explodes. Time frame, it could be anywhere from 3 to 7 years, depending on how things go geopolitically, economically, and everything. So that's the basis, or the underlying, let's say, presumption of the situation. So I trade this, and I want to show you guys this. This is my, I don't know if you guys can see that. I want you guys to look at these down here, these two bottom ones. These are the two, you can see I'm down about 40 grand on one of them, and the second biggest loser is about 15 grand. The one that's 40, the ones that, well, it's not on the bottom. You guys can see that it's red, right? Yeah. They're like big red numbers. I'm sure you guys can see the digits. It's 38 grand, 76 with 81 cents. The other one is over 15,000 in an open loss. And so ALO, which is a gold, primarily a gold miner, this isn't it, is what happened to me in this situation, which wasn't my fault, is they did a reverse stock split. So while I was in this position, part of this huge collapse here was part of that reverse stock split. And so my entry is at this red line, and the market, the ALO, is down here. You guys can see now what's happening. It broke into this trend line. Now we have a higher low, which indicates buying strength, and now you can see how the market is starting to go up. The same patterns that we see on the ES, for example, is the same situation that we see here. If you guys can see what's going on is every time it gets to the higher trend line, there's a double top. Nick, you want to turn off these lights for me? There's a double top, right? You guys can see here. You guys can see here. Here it's happening again. But now we're starting to get more buying pressure as well. So I'm literally going to hold this. I'm down right now about 40 grand. I think I have 120 or something, or 70K or something like that in this position. If it gets down here again, which is probable, I'll double down. And then the average of the break even will come down significantly because I've already brought it down. And then I'm basically just going to wait until gold and silver recovers, which might be a year or two, right? But I'm not going to lose that amount of money. That's the first one. The second one was my fault because I leveraged in a little bit too high. This is a GPL. This is mostly a silver mining stock. And you guys can see I was, same thing. The red line is the break-even point. It's about 20 cents away now. And with what's going on with the silver or with the coronavirus, I think this one will get to the break-even point probably in the next 2 months, 3 months. Well, ALO, I'll probably have to hold that for more than a year to wait for the break-even point. And you guys can see it's the same kind of premise. The overall, this is the kind of down move, the overall down move from 2008, 2009. I played all this area right in here, and I got too greedy, right? It happens sometimes. I over leveraged in here, and then instead of it going up, it broke down, and now I'm negative on the position, even though now every time it goes a little bit lower, I buy more and I bring down the break even. Yeah? Questions?
When you say that you buy down more, that's kind of digging yourself out of the hole, so to speak?
Yeah, so the only reason why this works and in a normal trading world, that is the absolute worst thing to do because it's like you're digging the hole even deeper for yourself. So the difference here is that the premise is that you have the fundamental stop, let's say, of the mining price, which is $14, $15, and it's really not going to go below that price. And now because of the situation with silver, there's a huge consolidation that's happening where all these mining companies are starting to get bought up, and obviously that will cause a surge in price, and then you get the other stock, the other company's stock, et cetera, et cetera. That part of it is a little bit more complicated. NAK is a mining company. Most of the mining companies I have are out of Canada. You have to be really careful with these stocks because if you don't choose the right one, they might literally just say they have a mine, but there's not really a mine that exists. So it'll just go up, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, we didn't find any silver, and it'll just cause what's called a pump and dump, where it just goes up and goes down. The reason why this one looks like that, you guys can see the kind of the pump up and down, is because this is a company that had the largest reserves of silver in the world. There's a mine in Alaska called Pebble Creek, I think it's called. And once Trump came into office, he's supposed to deregulate. He doesn't care that much about the environment. He was supposed to approve the project, and there it explodes. I got about half of this move. And then here too, you guys can see, this is super simple, right? You guys can see support area, resistance area, just bouncing back and forth. I missed this last move. I was waiting for it to get to about 39, and it didn't fill my order. And but you guys can see, it's just super simple. Right? It's just literally the most basic of market movements, just goes up and down, and the whole premise about the mining price. There's a little bit more analysis into this, because obviously I wouldn't say it's necessarily guessing, but I would say it's more of an instinct where, okay, these people have the largest mine. They've kind of been neglected for a lot of years because of the environmental restrictions. Trump comes in, he says he's going to release all that stuff, and obviously, you see what I mean? So that kind of stuff is a little bit more guesswork. Or for you guys, for me, I think it's a little bit more instinct. But once it does this, for example, it stabilizes. The erratic behavior is gone because of the news, and then it's more based on the price of silver. I've always loved silver just because it's higher profit. And these are a little bit easier to trade because silver is a very jumpy market. It's like the DAX, where it like spikes and then it kind of just sits for a while, and then it spikes and then it just sits for a while. So these provide a little bit more movement to be able to trade. And since I need to trade more longer term now, it works for me because I could just, I'm walking to the flight in the airport, I'm just looking at the charts while I walk, and then I could literally just trade while they're moving.
Does this have the daily speed of this ES market?
This looks exactly like the charts that we use, but this is actually a daily chart. So every bar that you see on here is literally a day, so it moves nowhere near as fast. But it's the same analysis. Whether you're looking at a tick chart or, it's just basically a daily chart, which means it's a lot longer term. Yeah?
You don't trade options on this?
No, I don't. I don't like options. They're just, you can make a lot. I mean, it's not that you can't make money with options. Obviously you can, but the situation to me is that it's a little bit more complicated than what I like. Because it's not just buy and sell. It's buy, you have the option, then you have to do the, you know what I mean? Then you have to buy another option, and then I don't want to deal with that. Yeah? My favorite miner, and the one that I've made the most on, I closed a $67,000 position, is EXK. It's another silver miner out of Canada. And you can see this one, it's just simple technical analysis, really. I mean, you can see it's before it was the support area here, right, coming with a trend line here, and it was turning into a wedge. Then it kind of shifted. You guys can see that the support area went down a little bit, and then this got a little bit steeper. Generally, when you have a wedge, that pattern, the most likely scenario is that it's going to break out of the flat edge. But because of the mining price, that fundamental floor, I wasn't expecting it to break down. And if I'm wrong for some reason, like one of those, for example, I'm losing about 15K on an error I made just because I was too greedy, I know it's not going to stay there for very long. Right, so that's how I'm handling the risk part of it. And you can see right now, I missed the majority of this move, but I got this bottom. I exited right around here or so because I didn't want it to hit the area, the resistance, and then come back down again. And I'm in this, I'm up about $2,000 on this right now. My entry price, my break-even price is about 201. And right now, the majority of the miners that I have will probably see a recovery because of the situation with the coronavirus. As I told what I expected, like in March, April will be the peak. Things will hit the proverbial fan, it'll spike, then I'll close my positions, everything will be fine, they'll come back down, and I'll start the process all over again. Yeah? That's pretty much about it. It's pretty simple. I mean, you guys are asking, so I wanted to share this with you, but it's not, outside of the fundamental aspect of the mining price of silver and what's going on with some of the news and things like that, it's not really that complicated other than learning how to read a chart, right? And this situation probably won't be available in a few years because we'll see silver. The baseline for silver has been increasing, right? You guys, the original chart that I showed you with the circle, the red circle, before it was about 15, 16. Now it's gone up to 16, 17, 18. Same thing with gold. Gold before was at about 1,500. Now it's reached over 1,600. And the baseline is going to continue to increase as things get worse. As I told you guys, my expectation, what's going to happen in the world over time. But that's pretty much it. So it's just more longer term. It's basically the same analysis that you guys and I do on the E-mini S&P 500. Is just you can learn faster doing the day trading because you always need the repetitions in the beginning, right? Like you just, 10,000 hours is what they say. And then eventually, if you guys want to do more longer term stuff, you can. Be careful with the futures contracts because if you're going to hold for longer term, it's not going to work with the futures because the contracts expire. Right, and that's what I told you guys about the $120,000 hit that I took. That was like 3 years ago, I think, with the market. So let me see if there's any others that I have. Nikki, can you turn down the air? Is anybody warm? No?
No, you just got hot dog for your lunch.
Stop bullying me. Here's another one. You see?
Marcelo, do they have options on this one too?
Yeah, they should. They should. Yeah, they should. I just don't like options. I've never liked options like Forex. I just don't like those markets. The futures market and also the stocks are the least manipulated. So there's more transparency and I think it's easier to trade with. Options to me are a little bit more complicated because there's more than just one or two moving parts. Right, you have the option and the spread, and then it's just, I don't want to deal with so many things because I think it gets too complicated eventually. Because last year around this time, I literally had about 17 positions open. And so if I have to fly every day, I want to be able to just do it quickly on my phone, not worry about the spread and the price and the cancel, and I put it again. You see what I mean?
Have you ever thought of the SLV as the stock market?
I don't like the ETFs because they don't have the same volatility and there's extra costs associated with that. So they charge you a percentage every time you get in and you hold it for a certain amount of time. And that adds up over time with the amount of capital that I'm trading with. This is EXLLF. It's another Canadian miner. The premise behind this as well, and it's kind of like what we talked to you guys about in regards to the overall momentum, right? The long-term stuff. Remember that the 610 tick chart, we're literally trading depending on the amount of transactions in microseconds. If you really think about it, how many transactions really occur in a minute? It could be millions. Another day it could be 10, right? Who knows? So when you're looking at long-term versus short-term, here I'm looking at the overall expectation of silver going. We've already had the breakout, right? We had that huge run. And then the short term. So what happens? And this is what happens with some of those two losers, for example, that I had. The one that was my fault, the other one that wasn't. You guys can see overall, even though we're having lower highs and higher lows, that for the most part, this is starting to stabilize. And it's because of what's happening with the silver market where we've had the breakout to the upside. Now, obviously, a lot of these companies, you have to make sure that you're not just investing in just like fly-by-night companies, because anybody can say that they have silver on a mountain, right? And they can just go public and then get a lot of money and then just go bankrupt. That's the nature of this business, kind of like the cryptos, kind of in a way. But you guys can see this is, I did a video on it in Spanish. I don't think I did it in English, but if any of you guys understand Spanish, you can go watch it. But I've been so concentrated on the Spanish side. You guys can see the wedge. You see these two lines? Let me make them brighter so you guys can see. That one and this one. This is TradingView. You see? That's the same wedge. And down here, right down here, that last horizontal line is 14. And that's about 14 to 15 is about the mining price of silver. So now the reason why all of these are stabilizing now is because it was crashing from 2008, the price of silver. We finally got a version of a dead cat bounce. You guys can see simple technical analysis, high or low, there's more buying pressure, and then it explodes.
Where do you put this stop?
Say again?
This stop? Where do you put the stop loss?
I don't have a stop. The stop for me is the fundamental. It's like, I call it like a fundamental stop. I don't have a line that says, okay, I'm not going to lose anymore. I'm literally thinking of it, well, the mining price of silver is $14 to $15. This is the price of silver. Right now what you're looking at is a daily chart of silver. And if you really look at where the price is, every single time that it's gotten that low, it's just recovered, you see? This is an exception because this is 2008, 2009, but you guys can see. Every time it gets there, it doesn't stay there very long, you see? And there's a reason for that. It's because that's the mining price of silver. So if the price goes lower, then more mines are going to go bankrupt. The more mines that go bankrupt, the more buying pressure is on silver. So it's just a matter of time, right? So if it doesn't stay down there, then obviously more mines can still stay in business, but there's still more buying pressure on silver because of the industrial use of silver. It goes into computers, it goes into all kinds of things, whereas gold just kind of changes hands. So silver to me has a duality where it's a precious metal. People value it because of its, money properties. It's like a currency, right, that people used to use for thousands of years, but it also has industrial use. And there's literally not enough silver for what we need it for, let's say. So I don't have a line that says, well, if it goes below this, I'm gonna get out of the position. The loss that I told you about, that I had a $120,000 loss, I just decided to get out of it because I just didn't want to keep holding it anymore, even though eventually it would have recovered. It's faster for me to close that out and re-enter other positions to recoup that quickly rather than just wait and have that money tied up. See what I mean? So there's no physical stop. There's just, it really shouldn't get below $14 to $15. If it does, it's not going to stay there very long because of what's happening not only in the mining space, but also the geopolitical situation where it's like the war with Iran and the coronavirus and blah, 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 blah. See what I mean? And now you can see it broke out. Literally, it just literally broke out to the upside. And now you guys can see that the behavior, so to speak, has changed. I was playing all in here before a few years ago, but now obviously the dynamic has changed. And you guys can see it finally hit, broke out. Anytime you have a wedge, this is just a horizontal wedge, the same idea where you have the horizontal like that. Anytime that the price squeezes, it's going to explode in one direction. It went up, and now it's going to stabilize to be able to I think it's going to go a little bit higher over the next few months because of what's happening with the coronavirus. People are going to get scared, and it's going to go up, and then that's when I start the cycle all over again. Everybody looks confused.
So how much movement do you see in a day?
Depends on the day. There might be a day, for example, this last week, there was a lot of volatility because of the fear of the coronavirus. So anytime there's fear, people go into precious metals or the dollar, which is another thing you have to take into consideration. If the dollar goes up, it supposedly will bring down precious metals. But there's already been a few days where the dollar has gone up considerably and gold has gone up as well, and silver. So people are starting to treat gold as money again. That's why a lot of the central banks around the world are buying gold and silver. Like China right now is the largest producer of gold in the world, and they don't export any gold. It goes straight to the government. And Russia is selling all of their U.S. bonds to buy gold because all the central banks. See, this is what I always say in the recaps. You have to see what people are doing, not what they're saying. Why are all these central governments buying so much gold for? Why all of a sudden? Why are the city police departments in the U.S. militarizing? Like they know what's coming. You know what I mean? You just gotta see the writing on the wall, right? And during this, I think it was this one, yeah. During this pop right here, I think it was George Soros. He bought a Barrick Gold. I didn't buy that one because I just don't. It's a U.S. company. It's too expensive. Like you can't make that return on it because it's like $100-something each share of stock, and it's like, what's it gonna go up $20? You know what I mean? Like it doesn't make sense to me. Questions?
Do you see
Can you turn on the lights for me, Nikki?
Do you see any days where it moves multiple points, or is it just moving ticks during days?
So ticks are just transactions, right? You should think of how do I explain this to you? The movement of gold and silver has more to do with geopolitical stuff than it does about technical stuff. Whereas the S&P 500, even though it does move because of fundamental reasons, it's more technical rather than fundamental. Because the future that we trade is literally the stocks of the 500 largest companies in the US. That's literally what moves the future. Remember, future is a derivative. It's based on another financial instrument. So the movement really depends. Like this week, for example, I saw a lot of movement. Like one of those positions that I was up $2,000, I was up about $12,000 at one point. Because it literally just surged and then, oh, everything's okay, came back down. No, you know, South Korea now is up, sprung back up. So you have, I look at it from a fundamental and a technical aspect because I know what's going to happen in silver long term. I just don't know exactly when it's going to happen. It could be 6 months from now. It could be 6 years from now. So I'm just going to play the movements in between. And then it's a security blanket. If anything does hit the fan, I still got the position, so they're all going to explode. Manage it. Like I don't, you know, there was a point last year where in 3 months I was in a different city every day. Like event, wake up, airport, fly, get there, event, wake up, airport. I could, you know, when you're where you're exhausted, you don't want to do anything. It's hard for you to sit there and focus for an hour, 2, 3 hours to be able to trade. Where this is much more manageable because while I'm on the airplane and the internet, I can sit there and do all the research. I can look at the charts. It's right on the cell phone. You know, it's much. I've just adapted it to my lifestyle now. Yeah. My pleasure. Questions? And the way that you trade this is really the way that you guys are learning right now. It's really goes back to the first few chapters of the curriculum: runs, retracements, and then if you want to trade different markets, you just have to learn the personality of that market, right? So there's some people that I know that love to trade oil just because they just like the way it moves. But the foundation of what you guys are learning is essentially the way you trade anything. You guys can see no indicators, just lines. This is obviously a little bit more fundamental analysis, but most other markets you guys can trade with just technical analysis. And eventually, if you guys want to do fundamental stuff, that's fine. But it's much harder to connect the dots on like the geopolitical stage with fundamental analysis as it is just looking at a chart. You see a wedge, it's going to break out. You know, that's much more simple to learn rather than doing the fundamental stuff that I'm doing now.
This is the futures contract?
This is the silver futures contract, yes. And you can see it went, and see you can see how it spikes, right? Like, look, there's consolidation, one day spike, consolidation, spike. See, and this was, if you count the bars, this is probably in a span of a few weeks, and it went from about 14 to almost 18. Yeah, almost 18. Sorry, I think it went to 19.
Is there a volume in silver futures?
Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, it almost went to 20. So it literally went from 14 to 20 almost. So you figure $3.50 times 5,000, that's $15,000, $20,000 no matter if you per contract, right? The requirements to trade silver is a lot higher because obviously there's a lot more risk. But you know, it's just once you guys find kind of your own style, once you guys learn how to read the basics, it's really what it's all about. And then you guys can do oil or, you know, stay on the ES, continue to trade, or the NASDAQ, or, you know, a lot of the guys in Latin America, for example, they like to do the NASDAQ and the S&P at the same time because they move relatively similar. But there's a lot more volatility on the NASDAQ. And if you guys don't know what volatility is, it's just range of movement. So if the ES goes up, the NASDAQ goes up, it just goes up a little bit further. But it's less profit also. Like I prefer you guys learn on the S&P 500 because you guys at your level of learning, you need to have the slow days to be able to learn discipline. If you don't learn how, discipline is more important than making money. So you got to have the slow days so you guys can get frustrated and wait and have the discipline to wait and have the practice of waiting for what you need and not trading. You guys got to learn that stuff, and that happens less in other markets. That's why the ES to me is great to learn on. And then if you want, you know, like Nikolai and Jared, if you guys just want to trade other markets, that's, you know, you guys can do that because then you guys learn how to read the market. And then you just watch it for a while, you get used to the personality of that particular market, and then you can trade it. So it's pretty simple. Jim?
Yeah, is there a spread between the cash market and the futures market? I assume there is.
Yeah, there is.
Based on how much time is left on the contract.
Yeah, there is.
And is there a way to arbitrage that?
I honestly haven't looked at that. so I wouldn't be able to tell you. But there probably is. But I haven't looked at, to be honest.
The next comment is I have a neighbor who's an executive in ExxonMobil Oil Company, and I've been friendly with him for years. And back when oil was up around $90 a barrel, supposedly it cost Exxon $60 a barrel. That was their cost.
That's gone down.
Around and put it in the market. Okay, so I happened to be talking to him a few weeks ago, and the price of oil's down like 55, and I said, "You guys must be losing money, you know?" "Oh no, our cost of bringing it out of the ground now is
40.
about 48."
Yeah, I was going to say
I said,
47.
"Well, what happened? Because we haven't had a big inflation, or how come it was $60 3-4 years ago?" And he said, "Well, because we've become more efficient."
That's right.
You know, and so forth. Can the same thing happen to silver? With miners? Do the miners become more efficient when the price goes down?
There is less silver to be mined than oil.
Yeah.
That's why it's a precious metal.
Right.
So there are known and proven reserves for oil that can be tapped. And then they created the fracking, which opened up other places that costed hundreds of dollars per barrel to be able to mine, to be able to get out.
Yeah.
So I don't think that can happen to silver because of the nature of it being a precious metal.
Gotcha.
So the mining price has gone down a little bit as well, right? They got to get more efficient or they die. But I don't think the same thing can happen in mining. Anything's possible, like, you know. But I just don't think in the next few years, because since the price is so low, when oil's at $90, $100, they're going to pour all those profits to be able to get more oil out and more efficiently so they can make more profits. They're not going to spend extra money to find new technology to be able to mine and do it more efficient when they're not making that much money to begin with, because they just don't have the profits to be able to sink back into the R&D. So is it possible? Yeah, but I don't think it's likely. And even if that does happen, silver is a much more finite resource than oil. And with the way that people think about oil, I mean, look at India, for example. Gold is sacred in India. Like, they're not going to stop buying gold, right? Like oil, we can probably carpool, you know what I mean? Like, with the coronavirus, now China, 40 to 50% of the economy is literally shut down. I mean, you know, the demand for oil is collapsing. That's why oil finally came down. I mean, and if that does happen again, I'm mad that I missed this opportunity. I wanted to buy ExxonMobil and these shares because it ended up being like a 17 or 13% dividend. And then you literally double, triple your money on the way up. Most people don't think about that. But yeah, that's actually, I'm going to look at that when I get home just to be on the safe side. Because you never know.
One thing that's affected oil is deregulation in the U.S.
And that's, the fracking.
When President Trump came in, he deregulated and allowed, and they allowed pipelines that weren't allowed before. And so we're basically flooding the market with oil, brings the price down, and we also became energy independent. Now, will there be a price for that in the future? Probably, but.
Yep, that's helped the U.S. a lot because now we're an oil exporter. Again, 1-0, for the first time in 70 years.
Yes.
Yep. So that's basically.
So that affects the oil, I mean, that causes oil company prices to go up because of profitability, but oil futures would go down
If what?
because of there's a global abundance of
Yes.
in the U.S.
So the what's happening right now is OPEC obviously wants to control the oil market. If I'm not mistaken, they have about 40-something% of the actual oil market. Brazil now wants to get into OPEC, and Russia has a special agreement with OPEC, even though they're not actually in OPEC. So OPEC cuts production because they want to increase the price of oil. Well, the United States is producing so much and continue. Now the U.S. is producing more oil than any country in the world. Saudi Arabia is still the largest exporter, but the U.S. now produces more of it. So all the amount that they stop producing in OPEC, the U.S. is just coming up with the difference. And then the economy isn't as great as everybody wants it to be. Now with the coronavirus, it's even worse because the demand has collapsed. So now there's extra supply, there's no demand, and that's why we saw that huge downturn in oil. Jared and Nikolai probably got a lot of those moves because they look a lot on oil. Questions? Is this over your head or is it? Yeah? It's just a different way of looking at things. It's a way that I've adapted to, because I love trading. It's like it's a challenge. I think after you dominate it, it's trading is not like a video game where it's really difficult to win and then you finally win and then it's over. Because humans are inherently flawed, right? We're not disciplined, or we're tired, or we do something wrong, and so it's like a never-ending improving game with yourself. And that's why, in a way, because I'm so competitive, I don't want to stop trading because it's fun, right? You can never win inherently. And the great things about the business is when you do win, it has monetary value. So you can cry in the Ferrari.
So when you enter, do you enter based on the price you wanted to hit,
Yeah.
or your area?
Yeah, so what I base the entries on are based on the prices of the actual stocks themselves. So the reason I love EXK because it's one of the biggest winners. Like I told you last year, I had about a $67,000 win with it. But you guys can see overall, my break-even price is about 201. It should be this line right here, this kind of light line. If this ends up going here, which is a more probable scenario based on what's going to happen with the coronavirus, that's going to probably be about a $20,000, $30,000 win for me. So, here it did like a FOBO, right? It went up. So I'll probably exit this move if it gets up to about 2024, which is this area right in here. See? This one. So as soon as it gets here, I'll probably exit. And then the whole process will start again. It'll come back down. I'll put my first order probably at about $2, 202. That'll be the first order to make sure I'm in, because you can never know what happens, right? I think in the world that we live in today, whether it's an earthquake or war or whatever, it's very sensitive right now with the silver market because of like what's going on in the world. So I'll get in at about $2 or so. A little bit higher, a little bit lower, and then I'll wait to see what happens. Nothing happens with the coronavirus. Everything's great. Silver will go down. It'll probably go down to this trend line, and then I'll back up the truck. Like I'll put hundreds of thousands of dollars in it because I know it's not going to stay there for long. And it's literally just working between these two areas. Eventually, it'll break out, and then it'll make a new baseline. So if you look here, for example, let me show you this way. If you look here, for example, when the market was over here, just look at this. You can see the baseline is here. See? So there's another trend line coming from this point right here. It's this one. I moved it already, but see, it was coming down here, so it's literally a wedge like this. Right? And that's the baseline because of what's going on with silver right now. So I base the entries based on the chart that you see. And then I just, roll with the punches.
This is now.
Huh?
So this is still the.
This is EXK now. The other one that I have, this one, for example, is interesting. So see, look at the baseline on the left. See? Whenever you have the wedge, right, there's the flat part, there's a resistance area. The reason why it's like that is because if you think of a wedge analytically, what's happening? The buyers are holding, there's more and more buyers, but there's even more and more sellers. The price is still going down. So I still remember a situation with Iceman where he was taking a trade at the mid-band, below the mid-band, and it was a wedge that was like this. It should be backward for you guys, like this. And the market was just going back and forth. And your guys' baseline when you start is the mid-band, right? And we do that on purpose so you guys can remove all the external things like, well, where should I put my target? Where should I put my stop? Where should I enter? What you mean? We need to remove all those things so you can learn how to read the market as fast as possible. But here it's a completely different baseline. So before, same thing. This is the baseline. You buy when it gets closer to the levels. You guys can see the patterns, right? Where you have the higher pivot, it comes down and makes a weaker retracement, it goes down. Higher pivot, weaker retracement, goes down. See, higher pivot, weaker retracement, goes down. See, it just repeats itself. It's just like the ES. You just have to watch the market enough to where you're going to learn how to read the personality of that market, right? And everybody kind of has their own preferences as well. I'm a little bit more risk averse, so I like kind of a little bit more spiky market just because, I like to get dirty. This is EXLLF. No, sorry, BCEKF. It's another minor. So this is mostly silver as well. You guys can see this, look. So I entered right in here. This is one that I'm losing about $1,300 on. It gets back to the resistance area. When it gets to here, I double down. Then I brought the entry point from here down to about, it's not where the black line is, but it's literally it's right about here at the tip, right? So it shouldn't stay down there, but let's assume that it doesn't. What's the worst thing that could happen? You always have to look at both sides of scenarios. Most of the times when you guys trade, what happens? You guys want it to work, but you never think about, well, what if it doesn't work, right? What you have to always do is you make sure that you understand both sides of the scenario so you don't get surprised, because when you get surprised, you get emotional. When you get emotional, you make bad decisions. So I'm prepared if it goes down. See the trend line here? Worst case scenario, that's where it's going to go. You see the other one where it's working on right now? So worst case scenario, it's going to go down here. But if it goes down here, I'm going all in because it's not going to go much lower than that. So that'll bring down my average price, and then eventually when it goes up, which will most likely be in the next 2 or 3 months, get out, repeat the cycle over and over again. Until, yep.
This is not now, this is pink sheets, right? Or OTCs?
OTC.
You don't have a problem trading OTC?
No. Questions? Who's next for the testimonial? Em português? Quer em português?
He doesn't buy, he got a nice guy.
¿Cuánto has hecho?
4.
Okay. Questions?
Did you give it in Hindi? Did you ever short silver at all?
Yes.
You have.
But in the futures market, not on the miners.
What would be a situation where you would short it? Exponential or?
Into a trend line.
Yeah, or I see, for example, an area that the market's respecting quite a bit. I'm just playing the long side because of what's going on in the world, but there's plenty of opportunity to short it. You can see here before, here, right? Every time it gets to the upper trend line, like now we don't, it could probably go a little bit higher to where that resistance area is, which that might be what happens with the coronavirus. But yeah, there's opportunities to short it too. I just prefer to look on the long side because I'm not really day trading it. I'm more swing trading it. So to make it simple, I just look at the long side. Yes, I got it buried.
Word.
In a mountain. in a mountain up north. There was a report that they came out that they were changing the laws or something about safe deposit boxes, where they were allowing the government to go in and review your safe deposit box, which was illegal before. They didn't have a right to do that. So I didn't feel comfortable leaving it in a safe deposit box. So I buried it.
Pirate.
So it's a lot of physical silver. I bought it when it was like...
You didn't put a flag on top? Yeah, where you buried? What if you forget where you buried?
I don't. No, I pretty much. I actually checked on it last year just to make sure it was still there. Yeah.
You went in there with a shovel?
No. Yeah. Well. Yeah. Pretty much. With a metal detector. Yeah. Questions?
Did you ever watch how they mine silver and gold? How they're just looking for specks?
Yeah. I've been. There's a lot of that and illegal mining too in Colombia. I've been to a lot of those mines, both illegal and legal ones in Colombia.
Very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's funny, right? Like, why gold and silver? Why not something else? But human nature is a funny thing. Probably just because it's shiny, It's like.
Do you
Yeah.
think that the government's buying up that much gold that they'll come to a point, like just your personal opinion, that they'll go back to having to benchmark the currency against the amount of gold? Benchmark's the wrong word, but where it used to be regulated,
So-
that you could only have as much currency as you had gold. Do you think it'll ever get
I-
close to going back that way?
I think if things get bad enough, that's the only thing they can do, because there's nothing else that's possible. Like the amount of debt that all these countries are running up. That's why I don't believe, for example, what the news says about China becoming the new most powerful economy and bigger than the U.S., because now they have more debt than the U.S.
Oh, really?
Yeah. 2008, they have more federal and state debt and city debt than the U.S. And they have a much smaller economy, even though they have a lot more people. So they're going to have their own problems trying to continue to grow because, they're doing what all the other countries in the world are doing.
Well, and I think that, obviously it takes a lot of time, but the current climate, there's a lot of countries trying to take their industry back, like particularly in Australia and the US, there's big pushes to go, like, we actually have to be more circular in our economy. We can't keep being
But the whole world isn't doing that. Look at the European integration, for example. They're still kind of looking out instead of looking in.
Yeah.
That's a dynamic that's starting to take hold, but I don't think that that's necessarily going to cause problems. See, as I told you guys in the beginning, I think, now we're going to get into fun stuff. So there's a North Pole and there's North Magnetic Pole. Where Canada is basically, and then we have Antarctica, which is the South Pole. And then we have the magnetic poles, that's what basically protects us from the sun and everything. That's why we're not Mars, right? So the North Magnetic Pole moves, and they've been tracking it for, I don't remember the exact date, it might have been 100, 150 years or so. And every 6 years, there's an entity that the European and the United States military has to go and check in on the thing, and they check the magnetics, and they recalibrate it for all our GPS and missiles and nuclear missiles, so all of it, airplanes, that all works on the magnetic properties of the Earth. About 10 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, the magnetic North Pole started moving towards Russia much faster than it was before. So they had to recalibrate the North Pole, the magnetic North Pole, in a 3-year time span instead of 6. So this is why I'm telling you guys that I think that we're going to get into a very bad situation over the next 10 years, because the moving of the magnetic North Pole and it moving faster is going to be a very big problem. The earthquake that we had in 2011 in Chile, for example, was so strong that it tilted the Earth a few degrees. They had to redraw the lines here at the airport in Tampa because it was such a big change for them, even though it was just a minuscule tilt. In the Natural Museum of History in New York, there is a mammoth that they found in Siberia, that when they found it, the food was still fresh in its stomach. How is it possible that a mammoth still has fresh food in its stomach from thousands of years ago? It would have had to have frozen like that. And NASA has already talked about, every 300,000 years or wherever we do have a pole shift, but it's going to be slow and blah, 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 blah. I personally don't think that it's going to be slow. I think that it's going to be and then there's going to be problems. That's why you guys see all the earthquakes, for example, or the volcanoes now that are starting to go off. We had Iceland, now we had Mexico recently, we had the Philippines as well. It's like one after the other now, and I think that destabilization has to do with the magnetic North Pole. So, coming around to your question, the worst that things can get is that the pole shift happens and we don't have electric. Yeah. Like zombies come, the conspiracy theory stuff. That's the worst that it can get. That might never happen. But I'll have some gold buried in a mountain just in case.
Well, yeah, I think when shit hits the fan, tangible is where people go, isn't it? They go to tangible rather than intangible.
Yeah. People don't realize that after the Cold War, there was so much inflation in Germany that people were changing cars for a chicken. An entire car. A car meant nothing. They needed food. This has already happened. It was literally just after the war. Yeah. 50 years ago, 70 years ago, whatever it is. So people just don't have that perception. People don't study history. That's why I'm in silver so much now, because I see that there's a potential for that, so I'm gonna rake it big. So eventually, if the worst things get, or if things get very bad, then we will go back to the gold standard, because that's the only thing that's tangible. And people are going to get tired of this funny money business where the government is going to manipulate the currency, and it's like negative interest rates aren't good for normal consumers. It might be good for governments, but it's not good for the banks. We're like in Frankenstein territory now. Never in the history of the world have we had a situation where we have had lowest interest rates ever in recorded history, which is supposedly Samaria, blah, 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 even though I don't agree with that. So, all right, fun times. Questions?
Are you going to be here or in Colombia?
No, I won't be able to be in Colombia because it'll be too dangerous. Not that Colombia is dangerous now, but it's not like United States safe. So I get Yeah, it's pretty safe. Yeah, you can ask Jim. I finally got him down there. We didn't get him kidnapped yet. Yeah, it's fine, but it's not like, you know, U.S. safe. Even though I would beg to say that there's cities in the U.S. that are more dangerous than Colombia, right? Like Chicago, for example, or you know what I mean. So, but yeah, it's fine. But I won't be able to live there. One, because I'm a foreigner. Two, because I get stopped on the street all the time there in Colombia. See what I mean? And with like the trading stuff, then people think, oh, he's got money, whatever. And so, you know, I won't be able to live there. And things are going to get bad here too. Like there's going to be a breakdown of law and order here.
What do you think about US dollar? Could be leading world money or still time to go?
I think it still has time to go. We probably have anywhere between 3 to 7 years. Because see, if we have an earthquake in California, for example, like which I think something is going to happen in California in 2 or 3 years, the insurance company is bankrupt. It's over. Like, what's going to happen to the financial system when the insurance companies can't pay out people anymore? I don't think people realize. I mean, look at the coronavirus. Like everybody sits there and they worry about because their internet isn't too, or you know, don't call me sir or call me ma'am. Like this like stupid ass stuff. You know what I mean? Like, and literally, literally like in China we have a potential pandemic that can cause literally significant damage. Like I don't think that, I mean, look at what happened with the volcano in Iceland that went off I think it was 2011. It stopped the airline industry in Europe. Like in 1890, if I'm not mistaken, 1880, there was a volcano that went off in Indonesia that set off so much plume into the sky that people barely had food the next year because the sun wasn't coming in. Like I just don't think people realize this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So I think we're at a point now, and you can see the pattern of things happening, and I don't think the situation with the North Pole moving faster than it was before is a fluke. There has to be some kind of consequence to that. Nature doesn't work in extremes. It balances out. You see what I mean?
Last time when I checked, it did move about 2,500 miles in the last 10 years.
But you're not considering where it's moving. It was moving like this. Basically, it's like back and forth, and now it literally just goes. It's literally moving towards Russia right now. It's literally, the North Pole is literally almost over the land of Russia. So that's the problem. And what do you think is going to happen to the Earth? It's just going to stay there when the North Pole ends up in like Texas? You see what I mean? Like this is what people don't think about. Like, can nothing happen? Absolutely. Like it'll go right back. Everything's fine. But even if you see what's going on in our society, like things are escalating. A lot of people are fighting. We never had this stuff 10, 15 years ago. It's, you know what I mean? Like you got to look at the macroeconomic situation, and the reason why I like silver right now is because of all that stuff that I anticipate happening. Because it's not only the North Pole, I see it in the politics and the people and you see what I mean? And any time in history, the last thousands of years, people always go back to gold and silver. I'm not saying that that's going to be used. You know, I always look, I've learned as a trader to always look at any possible scenario to be prepared. So I'm going to be prepared for the worst. Pretty prepared for the best too. See what I mean? So that's why I like silver right now, because it's like the perfect, nothing happens, still great market to trade. Worst happens, still great market to trade. Yep. Oh, all this optimism about the world, huh?
Is there any?
Oh my God.
No, I don't. I have lived my life just kind of taking advantage and just living to the fullest. That's why I travel around the world, and I just do everything. I just jump with 2 feet, because I think the life is too short to not just be happy. See what I mean? So we can't live our lives assuming that the worst is going to happen. You have to live your life like, you know, anything can happen. But I don't necessarily think that just because bad things may happen, that there's not an advantage or an opportunity to be able to do well. Because during the World War, somebody was selling generators and stuff. Who was selling the chickens for cars? See what I mean? There's always an opportunity to make money. And the advantage with this business is you can't lose your job, right? The only way you lose your job Bernie Sanders gets elected president, he puts a 1% tax on the transactions, you're still going to make a shitload of money. Start trading out of Europe. You see what I mean? So there's always a way to make money and do well. It's just a matter of, you see what I mean? But that's why I live the life that I live, because I figured that life is too short. And tomorrow we could get sick, or there's a war that breaks out, or whatever, and the worst thing to me in the world is regret. That's the worst thing in the world, because you can't get that back. See what I mean? It's impossible. Time is the only thing that's undefeated. So that's why I try to live my life like tomorrow's the last day. Just be happy and do things for people, like, you know, the change that I think that I've caused, and all these kids, even in Latin America, they need a better opportunity. To me, that's the best thing in the world. And you make a little money along the way, you have a good time, you help people, you know what I mean? That's why I live the way I do. Like, I've done more things in the last 10 years that most people do in 3 lifetimes. You know, so that's just my kind of mentality on life. Questions?
Including selling pocketbooks.
Including what?
Selling pocketbooks.
Selling pocketbooks.
Your person
Yeah, the part. Yeah, that was. Yeah, I've had my fair share of interesting stories in my life. Yeah. Questions?
What do you think about silver dollars? Buying those?
Yeah, that's what I have buried on the mountain. Silver coins. Yeah.
Say, where's the mountain?
It's up north. That's all I'm gonna say. In Russia, yeah. So yeah. Questions? Did you guys like it? Yeah, it's good. Except about talking the end of the world.
We can have a Bible study after.
Yeah. It's funny because there's even, you guys might find this interesting. There's a guy named Graham Hancock who talks about the history of what happened in the world. It's very good. He presents the information with facts, not with like maybes. And supposedly there was another civilization before ours, before Sumeria. That's why this stuff about global warming, I take it with a grain of salt, because I think of, well, if there was ice on North America 1,000 years ago, how did the earth get warmer if we didn't have cars? You see what I'm saying? Like, I'm not saying we should not take care of the environment, because I think all the plastic in the ocean is atrocious, but you know what I mean? So if you guys want to hear a different perspective about things, he's something really, he's really interesting to speak to, because he even talks about how there was a previous civilization in North America before even Europe and Rome and all this stuff. That's why, for example, it's really weird that they have pyramids in Mexico and Egypt and Cambodia. It's super interesting. I'm fascinated by that stuff, so it's something you should definitely. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast. It was really interesting. Questions? Who's next for the testimonial? Português.
Where are you taking day trading academy to? What's next for it?
So the reason why I started Speed Up Trader was kind of like a transition as well, because even though like the business of selling courses is great, you make money, blah, 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 you make a lot more money when you find like one trader like Jim, for example. You know what I mean? And he's like 1 in a million, because even though most of us, and he agrees too, he's had problems too, he picked this up pretty quick. You know what I mean? So I'm not gonna give myself credit. Like I think he was just born for this, and then he was trained for this as well with the life that he lived, right? Like being a firefighter, attention to detail. He's a programmer. It's kind of he was in Spanish you say he was pulir. He was like shaped, and he just kind of and then it was great for trading. Iceman, the same thing. Iceman was a professional hockey player. The discipline, you know what I mean? Other people, like someone, for example, like Nikolai, he wasn't trained to do this, or Jared, right? Most of us that live in admin jobs and things like that. So there's going to be a point where there's so much volatility in the market where it's going to be a, what's the word? And I keep thinking in Spanish because I've been in Latin America so long. There's a higher opportunity cost to have the academy rather than focusing on trading. So I used to always do the funding internally, even before I started ETA. That was my goal, because I figured, well, if I'm going to go on vacation or I want to be lazy, I still want to make money, right? So let me train these guys to make money for me, and then they can have capital, and then they can have freedom, and then it kind of works for everybody. And so I always did that internally, but it was super inefficient because, I would go to that guy's computer and put the login and password, but I wouldn't show him the password so he wouldn't have it. And then if I had to take away an account, like that's what happened with Manny when I found it was trading sim and stuff. It's like a disaster. So with speed up, everything's automated, and now I can open it to the public. So now I don't have to worry about the way people trade as long as they fit in the parameters, and then they can just trade. And so we just went to the Philippines. We got traders really all over the world. We're getting started now in Brazil as well. But now the focus is more speed up than DTA because I see now the shift that's happening, and with the volatility we're going to have, I want to be able to have the traders in place to be able to make the money when the market goes haywire, or even just a recession, right? The market's going to go down a lot faster than it goes up. And so we can make a lot more money trading than selling any course in a year, especially if you find a guy like Jim, right? There's a reason I call him Superman. So that's basically where I'm focused on now. And then, and then that's basically it. Do all you guys know how Speed Up works? No? So you can come and apply to trade our money. So instead of like paying for a license for Ninja and opening up your own account, you can obviously practice with micros as well. It's 120, 150, I think, and 300. You apply for the test. It's an unlimited time, but there's a monthly cost, and you just have to hit certain parameters. For the $50,000 account, you have to hit $3,000 profit. So if you assume, let's say, $100 a day, 2 points on average, you would hit it in a month and a half on average, right? So it would be 150 the first month, 150 the next month. And then once you pass the test, you trade a funded account where you withdraw the money from the account. So you can trade, let's say a $50,000 account up to 6 contracts. And then the first $7,000 of profit are 100% for you. And then after the 7,000, then it's 80-20. 20 for you, 80 no. 80 for you, and then 20 for us. And then that's pretty much it. And then there's limit losses. For example, you can't lose I think it's 2,500 on the 50K account in total. If you do, you fail the test, and you could pay to reset. It's $100. And then you can't lose 1,250 in a week. We have a consistency rule where 2 days of your trading and the whole test can't be 80% of your profits, because I don't want a guy just to accidentally make a lot of money. I like the guys that have consistency, even if they don't make a lot of money, because they scale eventually over time.
So your tests are on SIM?
Yep. And I'm going to give people $50,000 to trade live for the first time. Then there's certain news you can't trade with. In Forex, we removed the news rule, but on futures there's a test for the news. We give you guys the list, where you can see and you check the time and everything. And you can't hold positions overnight. That's pretty much it. So you pay to apply, you pass the test, you get the money, you start trading, you become a millionaire. Everybody's happy.
Minimum time frame you're looking at?
No. So you just the goal essentially is to get to the profit target. So in the $50,000 account, it's a $3,000 profit target. So if it takes you 8 months, it takes you 8 months. But there's a monthly cost because the CME is expensive. Like I have to pay the CME for every trader, and then once you guys get a live account, I have to pay them $420 a month per person. They're expensive. That's why I started getting into Forex and like CFDs, because it's just like this, and they raised the CME fees this year too. They're raping all of us.
How many traders do you have so far? Do you mind telling us? Or?
I can't remember in futures, but I just had about I think I had 77 for Forex that just came in on the 10th of February. Of those 77, because it was the beta, it was like the first round, just for Forex. Of those 77, I think 13 are positive right now. And I think three or four have already had, five have already had to have to do a reset on the Forex. The futures, I honestly can't remember, but I have hundreds right now trading funded accounts. Like this month, I think I've already sent, if I remember correctly, as of last week, it was like $28,000 of people that have traded like on the funded accounts. Yeah. So yeah, it's going well. Yeah. More questions? No? Take a break? All right, let's take a break.